Hey guys, welcome to my 2022 Archer guide. I want to preface this video by saying that you can play Archer a number of different ways, and this is just how I personally play the class. It might not be the quote-unquote best or suit your playstyle, but this is how I found success on the class. With that being said, in this video I'll cover a general overview of Archer in both PvE and PvP. Please check the timestamps if you would like to jump to a specific part of the video. Archer in general is in a much better spot than it was in pre-reworks. The class is pretty easy to get started on and has a decently high ceiling, so it does feel rewarding to learn and master the class. Starting off with the skill build, you'll need about 1800 SP for everything. You can get away with a bit less if you don't take some of the pre-awakened skills. However, they are a lot more valuable now after the reworks. First skill we have is Wind Razor. This is our new iframe skill. We will want to level this. Next we got Piercing Cry. You'll want to take Absolute Piercing Cry. Meteor Dive, you'll want to take Absolute Meteor Dive. And you'll also want to take the passive for it. This has a 30% movement speed slow to Meteor Dive. Covering Fire is our first optional choice. Skill does do pretty good damage in PvP now. It's really only realistic to use in like 1v1 scenarios. Storm of Light, probably another optional pick. It does okay-ish damage now, and it can be used comfortably from like elevation or on walls, as the skill itself doesn't have any recoil, as you can see here. Wing Strike, you'll want to max out. The Wrath of Nature is another skill you could skip. Just like Storm of Light, it does okay damage now, and it's relatively safe to use on elevation, as there's very little recoil on the skill. If you have the SP to spare, you can also take the Breath Recover. This gives you 300 HP after you charge Wrath of Nature. Keep in mind that you don't have to finish shooting the skill after you do the charge for the HP. You can cancel this skill with Zephyr Leap, or you can cancel this skill with Meteor Dive, which is just spacebar, and you still get the heal from the charge up. Earth Shatter is also optional. Skill is a lot better than it was. It does a lot of damage now. I would recommend taking this skill for sure, especially if you get like the air attacks on it. You just chunk people. I also use it as a filler skill in PvE. Yeah, I would recommend taking Earth Shatter now. Bolt of Radiance, you'll want to max this skill. It's one of our tier 3 add-ons and does some pretty good damage from a good range. Arrow Explosion, you want to max this skill as well. Breath Stigma reveals players hit by Arrow Explosion. So if they have a ghillie on, it'll show their name. If they're a stealth class, it'll prevent them from stealthing for 3 seconds. Obviously, if you don't have SP, you don't have to take this. Breath of Spirit and Exhale. So this is our breath mechanic. There are 3 breaths that you can choose from. There's Recover, Stun, and Deceleration. These are not related to the passive breaths on our Meteor Dive, our Wrath of Nature, and our Arrow Explosion. So they have nothing to do with these. They only affect what Exhale will do. Recover will heal you for 500 HP and 200 MP. You can use this on allies as well as yourself. Stun has a 50% chance to stun enemies hit. Deceleration will apply a 30% movement speed and 20% attack and cast speed debuff to anybody hit. I personally always use Recover. This is our main source of healing, and there's usually something better you can be doing rather than throwing exhales into enemies. Our next skill we have is Ensnare. You'll want to max out Ensnare. You'll want to take Zephyr Leap, Earth Kick, and all of the flows for it. You don't have to take any of these skills. They're all pretty much useless. Escaping Darkness. This skill is optional as well. It is a forward guard stiffen, which was given more range and a faster animation with the reworks. It's a pretty good skill for getting MP back in PvE as well. I personally use it and level it. Shadow Hack, this skill is useless, don't take it. Birdie Clout, you want to max this. For your awakening skills, you'll want to take Watcher, obviously. Take Righteous Fire. You'll want to take Light's Path. You'll want to max out Radiant Explosion, Full Bloom, Grand Bloom, Spear, Mountain Breeze, Mark Bloom, Uproot, Light's Trail, Righteous Smite, Luthragon, Piercing Light, Ultimate Zephyr, Tactical Strike, Low Sweep, and Glissade. Light's Mark, completely optional, not really a great skill, you really don't need it. All it does is reveals enemies for 10 seconds. Ravenous Talon, definitely an optional skill if you don't have the spare SP. For bonds, we have a few good options now. Radiant Explosion is a pretty good option. It adds a bound to Radiant Explosion. This is a pretty big AoE, and it's also an SA skill. So it can be pretty good in large scale. However, it does not have like a ton of range, and we tend to play a lot further back now with our new skill and the new Full Bloom, but it is definitely a good option. Uproot is a very good option as well. It's good for 1v1s, really good for small scale. It adds SA to your Uproot, which is a float. It has a little bit more added value now, as we can now use it from PreAwakening. A Full Bloom, this one's also a strong option now, since we'll be using Full Bloom a lot more, pretty much on cooldown from range. This will keep you protected while dishing out a lot of damage. With Grand Bloom, just adds a forward guard to your Full Bloom. Luthragons, this one just adds forward guard to Luthragons during the whole animation instead of just the charging animation. This one's okay, but there's usually a better option. A Spear of Sylvia, this one just adds a bound to your Spear of Sylvia. It's pretty much just a worse version of the Radiant Bond. Don't take this. Piercing Light, this one just adds SA to the entire skill even after you shoot. I personally typically run Uproot. My playstyle, I'm much more like skirmishy, and I like to be closer to my opponents in like small scale and 1v1s. And it also helps me like hold my own better when like a ninja or a Sork or a Lon gets to the back line in Node Wars. However, Radiant Explosion and Full Bloom are both very good options. You can take any of these three, I would say, and you are good to go. For Rabams, there really aren't a lot of great options, sadly, for our Rabams. Our first ones are both pretty much trash. I take Deadly Explosion just because it looks kind of cool. I never really use this skill though. For the second option, I take Radiant Ensnare. This one's not bad. It's a bit more useful. It has SA, and the first hit of it is a Stiffen. Third option is Nature Shattering Arrow. This skill is pretty good. It does pretty good damage from range. In PvE, it does give you like all of your mana back as well. You don't really have to run Spirit Perfumes on this class. Now I'm going to go over what skills to lock and what skills to hotbar. In your Mayhem tree, you'll want to hotbar Earth Shatter, Arrow Explosion, and Ensnare. For Awakening, you'll want to hotbar Spear of Sylvia, Low Sweep, Righteous Smite, and Watcher in your third Rabam skill. In your main hand tree, you'll want to lock the following skills: Earth Kick, Volant Kick, Ascending Spirit, Vine Cutter, Shadow Hack. You can also lock Gaping Darkness if it's giving you problems because you keep using it instead of Glissade. In Awakening, make sure you lock Watcher, your class buff. Now I just want to quickly go over the BSR skills. Our 10%, we have Full Bloom. This is a very good skill for dismounting people off their horses, as the AoE is obviously very large. So any one of those arrows hits somebody and they will get dismounted. Our 25% is Zephyr Leap, which turns Zephyr Leap into an iframe. Our 50% is Righteous Smite. This can do some pretty good damage. If you got the opportunity to throw it into like a big ball of enemies, then it's probably worth it. You can also use the BSR Righteous Smite off of the hotbar input. You just press the hotbar input and then hold down right click. Our 100% is Radiant Explosion. The 100% are pretty much useless. They don't really do any damage. Not worth using. Okay, and now I'm going to quickly go over PvE and PvP add-ons. These are the add-ons that I run for PvP. These are mainly focused on large scale PvP, a lot of attack speed buffs for myself, and big DP debuffs on our big AoE skills like Arrow Explosion and Piercing Light. These are the add-ons that I run for PvE. They'll make a little bit more sense once I show you the PvE combo later in the video, but this should get you pretty much every buff and debuff for each pack. As for my crystals, I am full human damage, full RBF crystals besides Gen Vipers. I personally am fully committed to the glass cannon, do as much damage as I can on this class. It's very squishy no matter how much DP or HP you get. So I'm personally just going full damage to do as much damage as I can before the enemy gets to me. I would also recommend going DR on this class, as you get more accuracy from Begs, and you don't really have any passives to scale any evasion gear anyways, so I would go DR, and I personally run full RBF crystals. You can do different crystal setups, it just depends on what you want to do. Okay, here I want to talk about the options you have for swapping in and out of Awakening with Archer. Part of the reason this class is so fluid and fun to play is because you never have to C-swap on this class. So first I'll cover the options you have for switching from Awakening to PreAwakening. First we have our hotbar skills and Rabams. So Ensnare with Great Bow out will put you into PreAwakening, and then all of your other hotbar skills also. So Arrow Explosion put you into PreAwakening, and Earth Shatter. And then also we have our Rabams, so any of the Rabams you use with your bow out will put you into PreAwakening. We can also switch to PreAwakening with a variety of skills just by pressing their respective key inputs. These include Wind Razor, Meteor Dive, Covering Fire, Gaping Darkness, and Verdu Clout. These can all be used with your Great Bow out just by pressing their respective key inputs. One transition worth noting is Piercing Cry after you Wing Strike. You'll see a lot of archers do this. To do this, simply hold down C after you Wing Strike. You can also transition into Awakening by holding down C after your first shot of Wing Strike from PreAwakening. So to do the Piercing Cry transition, it looks like this. And then to switch back with Wing Strike, just hold down C, and your second shot of the Wing Strike will put you back in Awakening. So for transitioning from PreAwakening to Awakening, similar to PreAwakening swaps, you can also switch back by using the skills that we have on our hotbar. So we can use Spear of Sylvia off of hotbar. We can use Low Sweep off of hotbar. We can use our Q buff off of hotbar. Righteous Smite off of hotbar. We can also switch to Awakening with a variety of skills just by pressing their respective key inputs, just like PreAwakening. These include Radiant Explosion, Mountain Breeze, Marked Bloom, Uproot, Light's Trail. You can only use it after Zephyr Leap. So you hold down F after you Zephyr Leap, and you'll do Light's Trail and transition into Awakening. BSR Zephyr Leap will transfer you to Awakening after you come out. And then we have Tactical Strike. So the reason that we hotbar our Q buff and we lock our Q buff is so that we can use Tactical Strike from PreAwake. So this is just A or D plus RMB plus Q. And we also have Glissade. So if you forward RMB, you will go right into Glissade and be an Awakening. Real quick, I just want to go over the three main self buffs or pre-buffs that we have. They're pretty easy to apply before you start throwing out your damage. They're Light's Path, Glissade, and Ensnare. So RMB, WRMB, and Ensnare off hotbar. This will give you a total of 22 AP and 30% crit rate. Okay, now I'll show you my primary combo for PvE. So you buff with RMB, Ensnare, Arrow Explosion, Meteor Dive to get behind the mobs, first shot of Glissade, Radiant Explosion, Full Bloom, Marked Bloom, Luthragon's, Light's Trail, Earth Shatter. And if the mobs are still alive, then you'll go into Spear, Ravenous Talon, and Rabam, Nature Shattering Arrow. So what that's going to look like fast is this. For my own testing, it seems like Full Bloom is very picky with its positioning now in PvE. If you take Grand Full Bloom, you have to be a pretty decent distance away from the mobs, probably about here, to actually do okay damage to them. However, if you unskill this and take regular Full Bloom, you have to be inside their hitbox now, like this. You can play around with it and experiment with which one you think feels better for you. I think they're both viable. You just have to make sure you get your positioning correct. One thing that's worth noting, if you're grinding Elvia spots and you get a weapon buff, you definitely want to take Grand Full Bloom for the duration of your weapon buff. If you position correctly, you can one-shot up to 3 or 4 packs with a Grand Full Bloom while you have the weapon buff. Just want to note, this might not be the most efficient or min-maxed PvE combo out there. I've always been more focused on the PvP side of things. However, this is what I do and it works for me. Now I'm going to go into what protections Archer has. You can pretty much be permanently protected if you play the class correctly and rotate your skills. You have multiple protected CCs and you have plenty of super armor and forward guard skills to rotate, along with a total of 4 iframes if you count your BSR Zephyr Leap. So let's start off with our forward guards. First we have Verdu Clout. This is our uppercut skill. It's a float. It can be used with Great Bow, and the forward guard lingers until your character goes idle again. Throw this up while I'm waiting for my guild to engage, or I'm just assessing the battlefield, deciding what I want to do. Next skill we have is Zephyr Leap. This is a forward guard Stiffen. You can use this skill in both Awakening and PreAwakening. It's a very good skill. It gives you some distance and has a stiffen that you can follow up on. The last relevant forward guard skill we have is Glissade. Glissade is a 3-hit skill that can be used from PreAwakening. The first shot will move you forward, the last two move you backwards. The third shot is a KD, however it is quite a long animation to shoot all 3 shots. The good thing is you do not have to fully commit to this skill. You can press a different input in between the shots of the skill and go into something else. I use this skill to poke enemies from range and try to get like a ranged KD if I have enough space to commit the entire thing. This is a super risky skill to use close up, obviously, as it's a super long animation and it's only a forward guard. But like I said, you can shoot like 2 and then go into a radiant. So that's all of our forward guard skills. Do keep in mind you also have an S block. Now I'll cover our super armor skills. You still take full damage while you're in super armor and you can still be grabbed out of super armor skills. First skill we have is Piercing Cry. This is a super armor skill that also has a stiffen on it. Piercing Cry can be used after most of your PreAwakening skills. It's a big part of your movement and it's also a very good CC. It can be used after Wind Razor, Meteor Dive, and it can also be used to cancel out of Storming Light anytime after the initial charge. You can use it after your Awakening Wing Strike to go into a Piercing Cry and transfer to PreAwakening. You can use it after Zephyr Leap in PreAwakening only, not after Awakening Zephyr Leap. You can use it after your Ensnare. You can use it after your Gaping Darkness. You can use it after Verdant Clout. And you can use it after Glide if you're in PreAwakening. Next super armor skill we have is Meteor Dive. This is another super armor skill that has a stiffen on every hit. With the reworks, this also got a 30% movement speed slow debuff. This is another one of our very strong skills. This can get behind forward guards pretty easily as you go over the top of the enemy. This skill can be used after literally every one of your skills, Awakening and PreAwakening, just by pressing spacebar. You can also cancel skills with Meteor Dive. You can cancel most skills with this, like Radiant for example. You can cancel the second shot of Full Bloom. You can cancel Spear. Cancel Righteous Smite. You can cancel the charging of Piercing Light. You get it. You can cancel pretty much everything with Meteor Dive, and you can use it after any skill just by pressing spacebar. Next we have Storm of Light and Wrath of Nature. These skills are only SA during the charging animation. It's not really that relevant. You'll only really be using these skills if you're like on elevation and you're pretty far from the enemies anyways. Next we have Glide. This is our bread and butter movement skill. It's an SA slide on the ground. There's a 2-second cooldown, and the skill is something you'll be weaving in between all of your other movement skills to move around your enemies. The next skill we have is Ensnare. It's a short super armor skill that gives us 30% crit rate. It also has a 20% move, attack, and cast speed debuff on it. This is a good skill to throw out whenever you have a sticky opponent on you. You can throw this out, hit the slow on them, and then Mountain Breeze out to disengage. Next skill we have is Radiant Ensnare. This does an Ensnare Inverter Clout animation. It's full SA. It doesn't slow like regular Ensnare, but it does have a stiffen on the first hit. Now onto Awakening super armors. First we have Radiant Explosion. This is just a AoE damage skill. Like I said before, you can put a bound on it if you take the bond. It does decent damage. It doesn't have a ton of range. Next we have Spear of Sylvia. This is not really that great of a skill in my opinion. It can be used sometimes to bait opponents for a grab, and then you can cancel it with an iframe like Tactical Strike to catch their grab whiff animation. One thing to note is this skill has a built-in evasion debuff, 9%. So if you're dealing with a high evasion target, let's say you get the first CC on them with like a Wing Strike, you evasion debuff and then cancel it instantly with like an uproot or a Meteor Dive or something, and that way you get that evasion debuff on them. I usually have SA on uproot as well. I typically always run the uproot bond even in large scale. This gives me an SA float that can be really helpful for re-CCing enemies I may have like KD'd from a range while there are other enemies around them, or catching people in 1v1s. It makes my skirmishing a lot stronger whenever like a ninja or a Lon or something gets on me in Node Wars. Keep in mind you can now use this skill from PreAwakening, and it also makes the entire animation SA, so even that little shot backwards you can use for spacing. Next SA we have is Righteous Smite. This is a new SA that we have with reworks. And last but not least, we have Piercing Light. This is SA while charging. It's unprotected for a second right after you shoot it. However, it is a small window. You can also use this skill to try to bait grab classes. Instead of shooting it, you can just cancel into like an iframe tactical strike and catch their whiff animation and knock them down. So that covers forward guards and SAs. We also have a decent amount of iframes now. First, we have Mountain Breeze. This skill shoots you forward in an iframe and has a lingerable SA at the end of it. We can also use it from PreAwakening now, which is really nice. One thing to note about this skill is it does not have collision. So this means you can use it aggressively as well instead of just trying to use it to get away. Once you get the distance down, you can Mountain Breeze through your opponent and end up behind their forward guard and follow up with like an uproot to get a float. Like that, for example. Next iframe we have is Tactical Strike. This is the little roll with the shot at the end. Looks like this. The roll is an iframe, the shot at the end is unprotected, but it does have a KD on it. This is the main skill I use to try to punish grabs. With the reworks, all grabs were changed to all be unprotected on whiff. This makes Tactical Strike a very good tool for dodging predictable opponents and KDing them with the shot at the end of the skill. Keep in mind you can also cancel the shot at the end of the skill so that the skill isn't unprotected. You can cancel the shot with Glissade, so you go right into a forward guard instead of shooting the unprotected shot. You can also cancel the shot with Zephyr Leap, so you go right into another forward guard that gives you some distance. And you can also cancel the end of Tactical Strike with Wind Razor. However, this gives you a little bit more iframe, but there's no way to cancel the end of Razor, so you will be unprotected for that portion. And that brings me to Wind Razor. This is our new iframe skill. So far, I haven't been super impressed with this skill. It's a very short iframe, and the ending stab animation of the skill is unprotected, and to my knowledge there's no way to cancel the end of this animation. Mostly just use this as part of my movement combo or to debuff my opponent when I know it's safe to use, because it does have a very big slow on it, 30% movement speed, attack speed, and cast speed. For the most part, I've been not super impressed with this skill. And last but not least, we have BSR Zephyr Leap. This is obviously a super strong skill, like I said earlier. It's 25% BSR, stiffens on the first hit, iframe while you're invisible, and forward guard on landing. And then it also has that AoE float after you land that also has a forward guard. Keep in mind you don't have to commit to the entire animation of this skill. You can go into another skill as soon as you hit the ground. It's a super good skill to use to get away from opponents. It gives you a little distance. It can CC enemies doing unprotected skills. One sad thing about it is the animation is so long. If you hit the stiffen off the first hit, you can't really follow up on the CC. They are out of the stiffen before you can do anything. Okay, so now we know what all of the forward guards, the SAs, and the iframe skills are. So now let's talk about movement. Primary skills that we use to move around are Glide, Glissade, Meteor Dive, Piercing Cry, Mountain Breeze, Zephyr Leap, and Wind Razor. Learning to weave these skills together will keep you both protected, moving, and potentially catching your opponent using an unsafe skill. Using these movement skills together will look something like this. A very popular form of movement on Archer is what people call skating. This can be a little tricky to get the hang of, but once you learn it, it's pretty easy. This involves using a skill that's not in our skill tree. It's a little slide shot that you get while you're sprinting. So if you're sprinting and your slide's on cooldown, do that little slide shot. Character moves forward a little bit and you shoot an arrow. This slide shot can be used after every skill that you do, and the arrow shot at the end of the animation can be cancelled with another skill. So the idea is that you input this slide shot in between each of your movement skills, but you cancel the shot animation at the end so that all you get is that little slide forward, and this will give you a little bit more distance, and it also doesn't consume stamina. So for example, you can glide, slide shot, glissade, slide shot, glide, slide shot, mountain breeze, slide shot, glide, slide shot, wind razor, piercing cry, and then cease swap wing strike to get back into awakening and start the string again. So that string would look like this. So once you get good at inputting the slide shot input in between each of your movement skills, you can go a pretty far distance and not use a ton of stamina. Something to keep in mind, each time you do that slide shot in between your skills, you are unprotected. So I'll show you like a full skating movement string here. I'll also add a link to Nusar's skating guide in the description. He probably explained it a lot better than I did, but there is no concrete way of moving like this, and you can really freestyle with it and come up with your own ways of skating. So here's what a full skating string would look like. Something like that would be your full string. As you can see, you can go pretty far, pretty quick. You can also add like Zephyr leaps in there and stuff to try to catch opponents that are chasing you. It is a really good thing to learn for repositioning and kiting opponents. Okay, now that we know all of our protections on our skills, I want to go over what skills actually CC opponents in PvP. For stiffens, we have Piercing Cry, we have Meteor Dive, Zephyr Leap, Radiant Ensnare, Gaping Darkness, we have Light's Trail, and we also have the BSR Zephyr Leap, the first hit. For floats, we have Ritter Clout, our uppercut, we have Uproot, the end of BSR Zephyr. For KDs, we have Wing Strike, Piercing Light, Tactical Strike, and the third shot of Glissade. For knockbacks, we have Luthragon, and we have Earthshatter. So as you can see, we have a lot of stiffens. One common mistake with new archers is they spam Wing Strike, even when it's on cooldown. So this skill does not KD while it's on cooldown, and it does virtually no damage as well. So try to avoid using Wing Strike when it's on cooldown. You really only want to throw that out after you get a stiffen. So you kind of want to use Wing Strike as like a follow-up CC after you get a stiffen. So like if you get a stiffen with Zephyr Leap, for example, you can follow up with a KD from Wing Strike. Or if you get a knockback from Luthragon's, follow up with a KD, Wing Strike. You really want to use your Wing Strike sparingly. You don't want to just throw that skill out all the time. It's unprotected, and you really want to use it to KD your opponent, as it's your fastest ranged KD that you have. As far as like following up on stiffens from close range, like if you get a Meteor Dive, for example, you can follow up with Ritter Clout for a float, do some damage, and then re-KD with Wing Strike. One thing I forgot to mention, you can instant cast Luthragon after some of your awakening skills. So this is what normal cast Luthragon looks like. You never want to do that. You always want to instant cast your Luthragons. So the skills that you can instant cast Luthragons after are Full Bloom, Marked Bloom, Uproot, Light's Trail, Glissade, Glide, and Tactical Strike. You can actually fast cast it after a Light's Path input as well. That's just your R&B skill. Like that. Let's go over some 1v1 and large scale combos, just some easy bread and butter combos that I tend to use. For 1v1s, I tend to use the PreAwakening skills a lot more now once I get a catch. These do a lot of damage, and with my playstyle, I'm typically fairly close to my opponent in 1v1s. I like to play up close and personal for the most part. So let's say, for example, I catch this guy with a Meteor Dive stiffen. I would follow up with a Ritter Clout, Earthshatter, Covering Fire into Wing Strike to re-KD, and then Marked Bloom into Luthragon's Light's Trail Full Bloom. So a combo like that, done fast, would look something like this. Sometimes I'll go for a double stiffen combo. So when I'm moving around opponents in like close quarters, Meteor Dive isn't always like hit confirmable, so you can't always use Meteor Dive and then like confirm the stiffen hit before you go into something else, because you are unprotected at the end of Meteor Dive if you don't go into something else right after. So I typically go into like a Piercing Cry right after Meteor Dive, and this is like, so I can hit Meteor Dive, and if I see I got the stiffen, I can re-stiffen like that with Piercing Cry, and then go in for the last CC. And then throw damage, maybe go for a down smash with Light's Trail. Now I'll show you a fully ranged combo. With the reworks, Archer was given a lot more range damage, so it is possible to fully combo people from range now. An example range combo would look something like this. Wing Strike, Full Bloom, Mark Bloom, Tactical Strike, Luthragon, Light's Trail, Righteous Smite. Okay, so now I want to try to show you a protected combo to use for like when you get a CC, but there's another enemy nearby the person that you knock down. So let's say you get a KD with Piercing Light. You would close the distance after you get the KD with Glide, first shot of Glissade, and then Meteor Dive over your opponent. Free float with Uproot into Radiant, into Spear, and then by that time your opponent is about to get up, so you'd want to Glide and then Mountain Breeze out to disengage. So that combo would look like this. Piercing Light, Glide, Glissade, Meteor Dive, Float, Radiant, Spear, Glide, get out. Now for a large scale combo. In large scale, you kind of want to try to stay as ranged as possible to avoid getting like one tapped, as our class is extremely squishy. An example combo would look something like this. Let's say these scarecrows are some enemies and you happen to get like a good flank on them or something. Say you KD them with Wing Strike to start off, so that's just A or D plus L and B. Next you would go into Full Bloom, and then Piercing Light to re-KD them. And then you want a first shot of Glissade into Full Bloom, Luthragon, Light's Trail, Righteous Smite. With that combo fast would look something like this. Obviously, if you're fighting front to back and like just following your main ball in, then you don't really have to do all the CCing by yourself. You basically just throw all your range damage into the enemy main ball. There's nothing really to it. Make sure you're using your Grand Bloom, your Marked Bloom, your Piercing Light, your Luthragons, your Light's Trail, your Righteous Smite, your Wing Strike, your Arrow Explosion, your Bolt of Radiance, and your Rabams Nature Shadowing Arrow. Those are your primary range skills that you can use. I think the biggest part of Archer in large scale is definitely your positioning. Make sure you pay close attention to your minimap for flank classes collapsing on your backline, and also try to find good flank positions yourself around the enemy main ball. If you can get a good flank and fight more like to the side of the ball rather than just trying to double TP dive with your casters, I think you'll have a much better time. Hopefully this guide was helpful. I know it's a bit lengthy and I apologize for that. I just really didn't want to do multiple videos and I wanted to cover a lot of stuff. I'm sure there's some stuff I missed, so if you have any questions or anything, feel free to leave a comment. I'll get to them as soon as I can. Hit me up on Discord, or you can stop by my Twitch when I'm live. I'll add a link to that in the description. I hope you enjoy Archer. Thanks for watching. Peace!